Life wedge. Stated simply, it is the wedge with the sharpest of angles that drives the deepest. So, in some ways, what we're talking about here, if you imagine a wedge or maybe an axe, in some ways, different types of axes have different functions and different purposes. So, if you're getting a splitting maul, generally speaking, you're going to have a lot of mass, and you're going to have a fairly blunt angle of entrance and a blunt wedge, where that purpose is to be able to drive into the wood and split it. So you want not a sharp wedge, but you want more mass to drive apart the separate aspects of the log. However, you then have axes that are designed to cut, to slice. And so they're going to have, rather than a splitting maul kind of wedge, they're going to have a sharper wedge so they can drive the deepest, so they can go deeper in impact. In some ways, the main principle here is that the more impact you want to have, or the more you want to affect life, you need to have a greater focus to your life. So it's almost like an aspect or a principle of specialization. The jack of all trades, the Renaissance man, which, if I'm honest, has kind of been one of the things that I've driven myself towards, I guess, um, has a less deep impact in general than somebody who specializes in an area of expertise, because then they're able to be maximally useful, because their research, their experience, all of that is on a narrow field where it can drive far deeper. I would say there's a balance to that, though, because to some degree, the mass involved is what drives the bit home. And so, what you're wanting is two different things. Not jack of all trades, where there's not really a clearly defined point of impact. But also, you don't want just this skinny little thing that's going to drive deep but make no impact. It's just going to bury itself and be useless. And so, what you need is a focused point of attack, but you need sufficient mass behind that to drive it home. And so, as you apply that to your life, in many ways, figure out what that focus is. What is that life mission? What is that thing that you're aiming at? And then invest time and effort into gaining expertise and a range of information and knowledge and experiences that can then be brought to bear on that point. So, an example, for instance, if you're going to be a mechanic, you're going to want to not necessarily only know your way around a carburetor. You could be a carburetor specialist. You could be the best person in the world to work on a carburetor, and you could probably still find some business nowadays. But there's a certain sense in which people want their cars to work, not just the carburetor. There's a whole lot of other components. So you need to have some expertise, not just in carburetors, but you need expertise in the electrical systems. You need expertise in the suspension. You need expertise in the computer, the PCU, the power control unit. You need to understand how to make that car work. Now, obviously, you can become more or less specialized in that field, and depending upon your market, it would behoove you to be more or less specialized. So, generally speaking, the larger the city, the more specialization is useful. The smaller the population, the broader your expertise needs to be. So, for instance, a small town mechanic may need to be able to work on Dodges and Chevys and Fords and a few simple, or not simple, a few basic imports like a Kia and a Hyundai and a Honda and a Toyota and a BMW. And you need to be able to fix the vast majority of things that are wrong with them. However, if you're in a major metropolitan city, maybe being a Mercedes specialist can give you a higher degree of income because there's the population base to support it. Similarly, I would say this is also true in church world. If you go into small town, basically the pastor of the church needs to be able to do everything that needs to be done. That's the generality. You need to be able to lead ministry teams. You need to be able to lead the major board. You need to be able to cast vision. You need to be able to preach passionately and in a way that inspires people to follow. You need to be able to do counseling. But you're not going to be a specialist in any one of those fields. Whereas you go to a larger population base or a larger church, quite often you have staff, pastoral staff. So you'll have the person that specializes in counseling, the person that specializes in youth, the person that specializes in children, the person that specializes in family ministries, the person. So you get the idea. Your life wedge is a balance of breadth of experience and point of impact. And you need to kind of develop that not just based upon your occupation, but also upon the population base that you're in. The larger the population base, the more you specialize. The smaller the population base you're in, the less you specialize, the more broad your expertise needs to be. Life wedge.